got a full slate of Steelers news and rumors to cover today on Steelers Talk. First, Broderick Jones has reportedly been named the starting left tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'll break down the ramifications of that and the future of right tackle for the Steelers as well. Then we'll talk about the latest on Brandon Aiyuk. There's been a lot that has been going on over the last 48 hours. I'll give you the very latest. And then make sure you guys stick around to the end of today's show, where we're going to be going over a potential new wide receiver free agency target that Bleacher Report thinks may get cut from their current team in the coming weeks. Now, let me know down there in the comments section before we get into today's content. Do you plan on attending Steelers training camp in Latrobe this year? Me and Cassie, we are going to be going at the beginning of August this year. Can't wait to watch Russell Wilson and Justin Fields out there live and in the flesh at Latrobe. It's going to be so much fun. So kick off today's show by let me know if you're going to Latrobe this summer. Okay, now let's get into the latest surrounding Broderick Jones here, where Pittsburgh reportedly named Broderick as the starting left tackle for the 2024 season. For the Pittsburgh Steelers last year, he played a lot of right tackle. There's been some debate as to where they should put Broderick versus Troy Fautanu, the first-round pick out of Washington this year. Seems like the team has settled at left tackle. This is what Mark Caboli from The Athletic had to say about their plan at tackle this year. Jones is your starting left tackle. Moore and Fautanu will battle for right tackle in camp. The loser of that battle will be the swing tackle. Now, if you take a look at the Steelers' offensive line depth chart right now, you could definitely say Dan Moore Jr., Troy Fautanu, who's going to win that battle. Nate Herbig versus Zach Frazier. Herbig's going to get the pole position here heading into training camp, even though I think Frazier's going to take over that center spot. But it seems like Broderick Jones is the team's plan at left tackle to this point, and I have no problem with this decision. Now, when they drafted Troy Fautanu, who was a left tackle at the University of Washington, I thought he was a better pass protector than even Broderick was at left tackle there at Georgia. He's more of a run blocking, mauling type of tackle. I thought they'd keep Fautanu on the left side, and they would keep Broderick where he finished his 2023 season on the right. But it's come to everybody's attention here that Broderick feels more comfortable on the left side. That's where he's played a majority of his snaps in his life. And then Fautanu says he feels comfortable anywhere. In fact, he's more comfortable on the right side. So listen, man, wherever these guys feel comfortable, wherever they're going to be playing their best ball is where I want them. And it seems like this everything has kind of figured itself out along the offensive line for the Steelers here. Now, the biggest takeaway from this potential news here of Broderick Jones being locked in at left tackle is that Dan Moore Jr. could be on the hot seat here, because Dan made it very known during the offseason program this year that he doesn't really feel comfortable being a right tackle, which could mean that he could be on his way out via trade in the coming weeks. This is what Dan Moore Jr. had to say earlier this offseason about playing left tackle versus right tackle. Based off of the amount of starts I have on the left side, I would like to view myself as a left tackle in this league. Not everyone can play both sides. The people that can are really blessed and really athletic people. Dan has also said in the past that going to the other side is like wiping with your other hand, which is kind of gross, but also a perfectly good metaphor there, which is kind of crazy. But listen, man, I do think that Dan Moore Jr. is going to get traded this offseason. It kind of gets the same vibes, of the Kevin Dotson situation last year, where it didn't really seem like Dotson wanted to be in the building. He wanted to be a starter somewhere, and eventually a deal did get done where they sent Dotson to the Rams. Now, some potential destinations that could be looking for a starting left tackle upcoming this next year are the Kansas City Chiefs and the Washington Commanders. Now, it's two completely different ends of the spectrum here, right? Kansas City just won a Super Bowl, right? And then you get the Washington Commanders, who had the number 2 overall pick. So in terms of where these organizations are currently, you couldn't be further apart. But the thing that keeps them in the same category here is that they're both potentially looking for a starting left tackle heading into the 2024 season. And Dan Moore Jr. is still relatively young. He's very experienced, and he doesn't cost the team that trades for him all that much. Now, you have to remember here what Omar Khan was able to get for Kevin Dotson in a trade with the Los Angeles Rams last year. And honestly, for somebody like Dotson, who the team and the league kind of viewed as a backup guard at that point, it was a pretty darn good haul. You got a 4th-round pick last year, and then you get a 5th-round pick in this upcoming draft in exchange for Dotson, a 5th-rounder in last year's draft, and then a 6th-rounder in this year's upcoming 2025 draft. So in my opinion, this was a pretty darn good haul for a guy like Kevin Dotson at the time, based on what we thought about Dotson. Now, Dotson ended up being one of the best guards in football, so maybe the Steelers Could have maybe gotten a little bit more if Dotson would have played better here in Pittsburgh, but I digress. But let's just say, for the sake of argument here, that they trade Dan Moore Jr. to the Commanders for the exact same deal here, where you get a 4th-round pick next year, a 5th-round pick 2 years from now, and then you downgrade those picks for the Commanders, sending your 5th and your 6th in those respective drafts. A couple pick swaps in exchange for Dan Moore Jr. I think that this is perfectly fair for both sides, and honestly, this is something that I would like to see Omar Khan try to pull off again. But let me know down there in the comments section for today's pinned comment, would you accept this trade if you were Steelers GM Omar Khan for offensive tackle Dan Moore Jr.? Type A if you would accept it, or type D if you would decline it. Like I said, this is going to be the pinned comment on today's show, so YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds. And when that happens, take advantage of that time by letting me know if you're taking this deal. So now let's talk about the Brandon Aiyuk stuff. And you know what, guys? I hear you guys in the comments. Some of you are very upset and very annoyed by the fact that we keep talking about Brandon Aiyuk, because I think that we have done more Brandon Aiyuk videos and segments and topics on our videos throughout the entire offseason than any other topic. But man, when things just keep coming up and keep popping up around this guy and a potential trade that could be coming, and the Steelers still have that massive need at wide receiver, we're going to be covering this guy in the Brandon Aiyuk saga all the way to the end. So I really do appreciate everybody that maybe is annoyed with this topic, bearing with me here, because I do think it's important that we address it here on this show. So when it comes to the latest on Aiyuk, yesterday, Ari Meirov and Ryan Clark from ESPN combined here and said, that's been the Brandon Aiyuk told Real Clark that he's been taking negotiations, quote-unquote, personal, and the offers so far have affected him. Ayuk's first choice is to stay in San Francisco, but he is comfortable playing elsewhere if they are willing to trade him. So that's definitely another big kind of development here in the Brandon Aiyuk saga. But honestly, guys, my stance has not changed when it comes to the Brandon Aiyuk stuff. I still think that the only way that it makes sense for the 49ers to let Aiyuk go this offseason is if Aiyuk and his representation straight up demand a trade. And to this point in time, we have no confirmation that he is actually done that. So I think that there are a number of ways that this Aiyuk situation could play out for the San Francisco 49ers. I got 4 different scenarios that I could see happening. The first one is just a brand new contract for Aiyuk with the 49ers. They just cave to it. They give him the new deal. And you have to realize here that the 49ers would have to give him $30+ million per season. And any team that trades for Aiyuk is going to have to give him that figure. That's what he believes he's worth. That's what Amon-Ra St. Brown got this year. Justin Jefferson got up to $35 million. And right now, the San Francisco 49ers are only offering Aiyuk a reported amount of $26 million per year. And that's a pretty big gap there between $26 and $30 million. And it seems like neither side is willing to come off their number. So at this point, I'm not sure if a deal is going to get done for the 49ers when it comes to Brandon Aiyuk. So, but another thing to keep in mind here, that you have to keep in mind for sure, is that this is a team that is notorious for getting deals done late in the offseason. George Kittle's deal didn't get done till August 13th. Deebo Samuel, another wide receiver that had a long, drawn-out kind of contract negotiation, his deal got done July 31st. We're not even into July yet, guys, so this Brandon Aiyuk stuff could still go on for another month or longer. Fred Warner didn't sign until July 21st. And then Nick Bosa last year didn't sign his all the way until September 6th. So this is something that could certainly get drawn out over the course of even the next couple months as we approach the 2024 season. And this is certainly a team in the 49ers that likes to lowball these guys earlier on in the offseason, and then they usually cave later on. So it certainly seems possible that the 49ers could give Aiyuk that massive deal this year and just not have the money kick in until 2025. In that scenario, they would likely trade away Deebo Samuel next offseason to kind of account for the added funds allocated to Brandon Aiyuk. Now, another potential solution here to this Aiyuk situation is that they could not get a contract offer done, but they're going to let him walk in 2025. And the thing that you have to realize here, and not that one text, that's the next segment here. So no contract and let him walk. So you have to realize that the San Francisco 49ers are looking to win right now. Okay, and that is something that, the 49ers have made abundantly clear. Obviously, they went to the Super Bowl last year. They were NFC champions. They had an explosive offense. They don't want any of that to go away. And they're trying to be Super Bowl champions this year. And getting rid of Brandon Aiyuk just before the season it's definitely going to decrease their chances of accomplishing that goal. So from the 49ers' perspective, they want to do whatever they can to keep Aiyuk in the building. Now, if the contract offer doesn't get done, they got Ricky Pearsall in the first round this year, so it's certainly possible that they could let Aiyuk walk next offseason. But I think probably the most likely scenario here is that they don't get a contract done this year, but then they're going to franchise tag him next year. You have to realize here the franchise tag for the NFL at wide receiver is $21.324 million, okay? And that is less than the $26 million that the 49ers reportedly already offered Aiyuk. So yes, that number is going to go up next year because it always goes up every single year. But, I mean, at the end of the day, that might be better than paying Aiyuk $30 million per year. And then even if you still want to trade him, you can do that by franchise tagging him. It's called tag and trade. I could certainly see that be an option as well next offseason. And then I would say probably the least likely scenario right now is that Brandon Aiyuk demands a trade out of San Francisco. I think that the chances are going up because of all the drama that's surrounding this situation. But, I just really think the 49ers really don't want to let go of Aiyuk at this point because they're trying to win. And even if there is a trade, even if the 49ers do decide to trade away Brandon Aiyuk, there's going to be other competing teams out there, guys. The Washington Commanders have been heavily rumored to be in the mix for Brandon Aiyuk. The New England Patriots have been in that mix for a very long time as well. A couple other teams, the Indianapolis Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars, are also in the mix. And then the Cleveland Browns have recently entered the discussion as well. I know I would freaking blow my brains out there if the Cleveland Browns ended up getting a guy of Aiyuk's caliber here, but I definitely think that this is probably the least likely option. And I think that at the end of the day, something is going to get done where Aiyuk stays in San Francisco. Now, coming up here on Steelers Talk, a potential wide receiver free agency target that we have not discussed on the show in terms of the free agency aspect. I'll let you guys know what I mean here in just a second. But before we get into it, let's have a word from our sponsor here at Fanatics. Go to chatsports.com/throwback to get this awesome and stylish and affordable Steelers throwback t-shirt in your closet today. It also helps out the channel because every time you use one of our Fanatics links, chatsports.com/throwback, I'll put that link in the comments and description of today's show. You make a purchase, and Fanatics is going to send us part of the proceeds. So we really do appreciate all of you guys that make these purchases. This thing would look great at Steelers training camp, at a summer barbecue, whatever the case may be. Get it right now. Go to chatsports.com/throwback to get this t-shirt in your closet today. So now let's talk about John Metchie III here, former Alabama star wide receiver, where Bleacher Report thinks that Metchie could be cut by the Houston Texans this year. And, the question begs here, should the Pittsburgh Steelers consider waiting this thing out, see which wide receivers get cut by the end of the preseason, and then just bring in the best one available? This is what Alex K. from Bleacher Report had to say about John Metchie. While John Metchie III is still oozing potential after being drafted number 44 overall 2 years ago, he hasn't yet produced in a meaningful way. That lack of production could cost him a roster spot, especially after Houston brought over Stephon Diggs in a blockbuster trade. With a crowded receiving room that also includes a pair of 2023 breakout stars in Nico Collins and Tank Dell, in addition to Noah Brown and Robert Woods, it's hard to see Metchie carving out a meaningful role without a stellar training camp. So listen, man, I think that Pittsburgh is probably being cool with being patient at wide receiver, whether that means getting their deal for Brandon Aiyuk, whether that means waiting it out and seeing if Juju Smith-Schuster or John Metchie ends up getting cut. I think Omar Khan and the Steelers front office is willing to be patient here and willing to pay their price to get their guy. This is what Mark Kaboly from The Athletic had to say about the Steelers' strategy at wide receiver 2. The Steelers seem perfectly satisfied watching how the wide receiver 2 position plays out in camp among a host of middle-of-the-road receivers, but the entire group has been underwhelming enough that a big swing seems imminent. And then also Kaboly said when it came to the wide receiver strategy, whoever gets cut on August 29th, so at the end of the preseason, best guy available. So essentially what Kaboly's saying there is that the Steelers right now, they could go out and get Brandon Aiyuk. They could make a swing for him, but also they could wait till the end of the preseason, see which guys gets cut, and then whoever they feel is the best receiver on the open market, that's who they end up snatching up. Now, when it comes to John Metchie, could he be the best guy available on the open market? I can kind of understand where Bleacher Report is coming with here when it comes to John Metchie, but, if you believe C.J. Stroud, the Houston Texans quarterback, Metchie isn't going anywhere anytime soon. This is what C.J. had to say. As y'all can see, he's running some of the best routes I've ever seen. His lateral quickness, his stop and start, he's been through a lot of fighting cancer and fighting injury. As you can see, he's making plays. He's showing up and showing out. I'm excited for him to show his value that we've all known he has. Now he can put it on the field. He's going to be a pivotal and important piece to this football team. So listen, man, if John Metchie ends up getting cut, that means that everything that C.J. Stroud just said is probably going to be a bunch of malarkey. If he is as good as C.J. Stroud is saying, and he's running some of the best routes he has ever seen, he's going to find a role on that Houston Texans team. So right now, I believe if the Steelers want John Metchie, they're going to have to trade for him. And they're probably going to have to trade a 4th or a 5th round pick in order to do it because it seems like the Texans really like him. And even though they have a loaded wide receiver room, it seems like Metchie is probably going to be a part of their team if the Steelers don't trade for him. Now pick a wide receiver for me down there in the comments section. These are kind of the guys that we've been talking about lately. Which wide receiver would you pick up if you were the Steelers? Would you go all in on a Brandon Aiyuk trade? Would you get Michael Thomas on a team-friendly deal in free agency? Or would you go out and trade like a 4th or a 5th round pick for John Metchie? Let me know down there in the comments section. BA for Brandon Aiyuk, MT for Michael Thomas, or JM for John Metchie. That'll be it for today's show, guys. I appreciate everybody that made it to the end of kind of this longer video here today. So make sure you click that subscribe button and make sure you type real one down there in the chat in all caps if you made it to the end of today's show. I want to see who my real ones are because not everybody makes it to the end of the show. And like I said, guys, make sure you click that subscribe button. We got more Steelers content coming your way this week. Steelers Talk Live tomorrow, Wednesday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Same thing on Friday. It's going to be a great week of Steelers content, so don't miss any of it. Make sure you click that subscribe button right now.